Okay, maybe we can start. Thank you all for coming. This is the session about universal acceptance, and the big question is the internet reaching all the people it needs to reach, and what are the issues and problems that prevent us from doing so. I would like to first do a quick presentation of the speakers, and then leave the floor to to Professor Ramas, who will be coordinating the contributions and people's speeches. So first I introduce myself, Roberto Gaetano. I'm the chair of the Board of Public Interest Registry, the .org. We are involved in IDNs because we have some IDNs among our portfolio, and that's my main interest. Other speakers are Patrick Falstrom, who will be joining us remotely, and among other things, he is a member of the Security and Stability Advisory Committee. And then we are going to have Martin Botterman, member of the ICANN board, and Dusan, who is from the Serbian registry, who also has experiences with IDNs and a lot of technical competence. Then I think I'll leave the floor to Professor Ramas Kvatadze, who is Executive Director of the Georgian Research and Educational Networking Association, GRENA, and will be the moderator for this session. Thank you.
Good morning. Thank you, Roberto, for introducing speakers. I hope that our meeting will be successful. However, I don't see too many participants, which is, I think, well, a little bit strange, because we are going to discuss today very interesting and very, very useful things. At least I hope so. So it's my pleasure to present first speaker, Roberto Gaetano. He introduced himself, so please, Roberto, floor is yours.
Yeah, I'm not really going to have a speech, but I would like to start this session by making a short summary of the topics that we have been discussing on the mailing list in this last couple of months. That will give also ideas about where the debate is, and maybe solicit some questions from the audience after the speakers have spoken. So we have touched several issues. We have started by saying that universal acceptance is not just IDNs, although we have problems in universal acceptance of TLDs in non-ASCII scripts. But we have the same problem also. This is an old, well-known problem. We had this even after the first round of new TLDs, when we had TLDs that were simply longer than the 3 characters that were considered wrongly so by some developers and some implementers as the standard size of a TLD. We have touched on the fact that universal acceptance has an impact not only on domain names, but also on search engines, as more and more people will use search engines to get to their preferred domain. We have also put the accent on the issues that are related to email and email address internationalization. And then towards the end, we had a sort of an overarching question that will probably be addressed by our first speaker, which is the question that on whether domain names is really domain issue or whether we have other things that we are failing to consider that are equally important. That's it from my part, and so I would like to go back to the moderator.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah. If there's questions, please. You are welcome. Okay. So then, are we ready with this remote speaker? So then, next speaker is Patrick. Please, you are welcome.
Hi, Patrick. It's your
Hi, do
turn.
you hear me?
Yes, we can hear you.
Okay. And I am trying to share my screen. I don't see that works on your, you seem to see my video. There's my screen. Okay, cool. So anyway, so what I will do is to give an overall description of where I think we are, where of course internationalized domain names fit, but I think it's important to try to understand and take a step back and understand what the actual problem is that we are trying to, to solve. We at NetNode, as you might know, we are running various different kind of DNS services responsible for distribution of time and frequency in Sweden. We do tons of things. We also run international internet exchange points and such stuff. But what a few of us have been doing the last 2 years, myself, John Kensin, Roberto, many people, other people in the room, we have been trying to understand what the actual problem is. If we take a step back and think about also the goal of EuroDiG, we talk about bringing more people online. And to me, bring people online implies the ability for people to communicate. And if I break this down, I find various issues regarding communication. It has to do with the ability to create text, audio, pictures, and video, which means both creating and receiving such content, and also when receiving it, to be able to present it in a way so it's possible to digest it and understand what's happening. When you have this information that you've been able to create, you also must be able to send it somewhere. And to be able to send it somewhere, and you need to be able to search for the recipient address. You need to, after finding whatever you would like to do, you need to look up the address, sometimes in your address book, as in a local cache. You need to be able to use the address. And when you receive information that is internationalized, you also need to be able to reply. And the question is then, where do we have the internationalization issues in all of these steps? Creation of content, digest content, look up, search for things, look up things, use addresses, and replying. So there have been a couple of issues mentioned already, for example, internationalized domain names, where we have issues with diversity of policy, we have contractual compliance issues, we have non-contracted parties where we cannot use the contractual compliance as a mechanism. We have both GTLDs and CCTLDs that live under different umbrellas. We have both registries and registrars, where the registrars try to do the right thing when interacting with multiple registries. You have a diverse policy, which makes the life for the registrars not easy, which makes it even harder for the end user. We have the email address internationalization, where in reality, my view is that we basically have two manufacturers of email clients, Microsoft and Apple, and to be blunt, if they just implemented whatever we wanted, we would be done. Regarding the web itself, we have issues with the search bar, with the content window, where most content both is created and displayed today. Those things are managed in W3C with the help of various decisions and agreements there, and of course software developers in a few web browsers that we have today. We of course also have the actual implementations in JavaScript by humans and programmers that make mistakes regarding guessing that the number of characters in the TLD is only 3 and not more than that, for example. We also have other applications, of course, editors, the ability to save content, the ability to have file names in non-ASCII, which might be problematic if you use different file systems. For example, Apple had their own normalization mechanism, different from Linux, for example. Store and manage the information itself, which of course the librarian community have been looking at for quite some time. But all of those applications, or most of them, are actually using related to IDN, two libraries, the libcurl and libIDN, and the question is how much emphasis and work has been done in those communities regarding proper IDN management. So from my perspective, what really should have impact is, first of all, to make sure that people have the ability to enter information in their own language, and this requires good script and character support in all applications, to be able to pass the information on and have it received and interpreted by others. I think also it's important to be able to help participation by having the ability for people to translate and transform the information with the help of text-to-speech, speech-to-text, and have that be able to be used in multiple languages. This would also help people with disabilities, because many of the tools that the disabled people are using require functionality in these areas. We have issues with user interfaces where you need to be able to have correct interaction, which is quite complicated in certain scripts. If we just look at character interaction, character-based interaction. We have mobile devices all over the world, specifically for the next billion users, which might have limited memory and CPU, including, of course, the old devices that must be able to support new scripts, must be able to support text-to-speech and speech-to-text, and also translation of audio. When I talk about text-to-speech things, I also talk about, for example, automatic subtext mechanism in, for example, the application YouTube and others which people are used to participate. Regarding Unicode, and if we limit ourselves to text, we have various inabilities and problems with render type and otherwise transform text to pictures, which of course have to do with some of the normalization issues. We have problems select, copy, and paste text, which is not so easy in bidirectional environments. And this, of course, is not only for the text itself, but also where we use text, for example, in the search bar in browsers. We also have problems to be able to enable people to search, which of course includes calculation of matching algorithms in a global context. So the global context might be known or unknown, and there might be various negotiation of context before the matching algorithm is chosen and issues there. And this goes all the way down to individual character issues, but for the human, it's more interesting just to be able to do searches. So one of the sub issues that myself and that I am working on at the moment is just to look at the very, very limited scope of be able to search using text within structured data in global context. And this requires all different kind of things from schema management. Many people in the room might know about the Dublin Core initiative in the 1990s, and doing that in the global context is kind of complicated. But just agree on attributes. This touches translation, but do always include, as it seems, negotiation of contexts, because almost all global information changes are across contextual boundaries. And when I talk about contextual boundaries, I don't only talk about changes regarding script environment and language environment, but also norms, and also other kind of contexts. For example, if you talk about physics or astronomy, or you have different contexts where matching algorithms are different. We also see an increased number of closed environments where, of course, it's much easier to implement these kind of searches within a closed environment, for example, within Facebook. But in real and more on the communication in the world is within these closed silos. That is, of course, a good thing for the end user, but it might be the case that we get increased divergence between the silos, which means that when end users move between silos, they will get surprised because the actual context and how to handle context switching and constant content negotiation varies between the silos. So the overarching question then, of course, is where in all of this is IDN and electronic email address internationalization, and where is Unicode there? And of course, they are there as pieces of the puzzle, for example, internationalized domain names and maybe email addresses. But I think it's really, really important to remember the overarching issue here, which has to do with the ability for people to create content, exchange content in their local language and script, regardless of whether it's text or audio or whatever it is. So when we have this discussion, just encourage everyone when we try to say, oh, we need to solve the IDN problem, we need to not forget the big picture and see what the ultimate goal is. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much for interesting presentation and for the comprehensive list of questions which are really very important. I would like to ask for questions now, and please present yourself before asking questions. Thank you.
Hello, good morning. I'm sorry I came a little bit late, so I don't know if you discussed this topic. My name is Todi. I'm a human rights activist for the Council of Europe's No Hate Speech movement, and I'm also a EuroDiG participant. My question is, how can you improve internet access to internet to the underprivileged, for example, refugees within Europe? I know for a fact that refugees don't usually have access to the internet, and because it takes a long time for them to get integrated in society, it takes about 3 to 6 years, and so they go for a long time without having internet. So how do you improve access to internet in regards to the underprivileged, such as refugees? Thank you.
Thank you.
Patrick, did you get the question?
Oh yes, I didn't understand that the question was for me because it was not really related to what I was saying, I think. But let me reflect on this. I think regarding refugees, a lot of the refugees that are moving across country boundaries and across culture boundaries, they of course move into an area where, for example, computers and others are not installed with whatever script and languages they are using. This is one of the globalization issues that I was talking about, where I think it's really important that every computer that is and every distribution of operating system, every browser need to have support for all the scripts and languages in the world, so that people can both display, listen, talk, and otherwise use whatever language they are using. So I think this has not only to do with refugees. it is actually for all of us, because all of us humans are moving over the planet, all over the place, and to believe that we are staying within the cultural norms and languages and other contexts where we for thousands of years have been staying, that is long gone. We are moving all over the planet, and we need to be able to support that. So I think the important thing there is to be able to, is, as I said, to ensure that distribution of operating systems and software is not culture dependent to different countries. So, for example, we only get Swedish versions of operating systems in Sweden. We need all support for all languages all over the place. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Other questions? Please.
Hello, my name is Katie, and my question is, during your presentation, you presented a slide where do we have e-sources, and there was very briefly presented e-sources. Can you say, for your opinion, what is more critical issues and how you think it can be handled? Thank you.
Thank you very much. Let me connect that to the previous question that I got. I think the most crucial thing is that we in Europe need to understand that there are many individuals, many humans within Europe that use scripts that are much more complicated than what we are using in our official languages. In the official languages in Europe, we use Greek, Cyrillic, and Latin script, but there are tons and tons of people living in Europe and visiting Europe for various reasons that are also using Arabic script for various languages. They are using also Chinese and such things. So we need to be much better within Europe to support and to understand other kind of scripts, for example, that we are using. Thank you.
Thank you.
First of all, thank you very much for the presentation and also reading the critical issues, and maybe it's connected in terms of resources. What do you think makes these things, are these things sustainable? Because really often when we talk about inclusion and making the internet more accessible, you know, putting in place different resources that can be put there, really often there is the issue of sustainability that, you know, it seems really expensive and not really achievable. Do you think it's really as such, or it's something that can be actually achieved, but there is not really the interest to do so because of many reasons that can be political or others?
Thank you very much. I think, unfortunately, a lot of the discussion, as Roberto can tell you about the discussions as preparation for this meeting, I think that there are two mistakes we have made, we who work with internationalization. The first one is that we are focused too much about internationalized domain names, and we have allowed people to not follow the standard. We need to be much, much more strict as a protocol police and actually hit down very, very hard on people that do not follow the standard as defined by the IETF. And also, of course, the follow-on standards regarding input and content creations that is done very often in W3C. The second thing that we have not been doing, apart from standards compliance, is to work with generic issues regarding script and text input and output. So what I'm saying is that we have been talking a lot about the actual addressing and internationalization of domain names, but we have forgotten too much to talk about content. And I think, for example, in EuroDiG, I have myself, as many of you know, been talking about internationalized domain names in EuroDiG and IDF for years and years, and maybe I have made the wrong thing. We should talk more about content. The ability for people in Sweden to be able to enter, read, and type Arabic text in, for example, one of the Indic languages, those kind of mixes. We don't talk enough about that. So standard compliance and normal information management. Thank you.
Thank you. Do we have more questions? I don't see it. Thank you very much again for interesting presentation, Patrick. So our next speaker is Dusan, right? Dusan, please, floor is yours.
Thank you. I'm Dusan Stojicevic. I'm coming from Serbia, and I'm working for registrar, international registrar Grenci. And I like to highlight some things for new faces here regarding IDNs. So when we speak about IDN domain names, we are speaking about ASCII. ASCII is a standard Latin script. With some of Latin script, we represent every other script. This is the way how IDNs work. So apparently, everything in IDN world is about visualization. So why am I speaking about this? More technical people will say all IDNs are xn -- something. It's represented to the user via browser in their script, which is, let's say, Cyrillic, Arabic, whatever script. It's only represented to the user. It's not that Arabic script or any other script will go through the network. This is about IDN domain names, and this is the first thing that you need to know. Second thing, and where I have some doubts, and I shared my doubts even with Patrick, is EAI or email address internationalization. What is the problem there? There you have on the left side, on the right side of the email, usual email address, you have ASCII, so-called Unicode. On the left side, you have Unicode. By mixing those two types of, we probably made some mistake, but we have the standard, and I can prove you that it works. So it can go through the servers, through the network, and such email addresses. I have one because I was at ICANN on a various places regarding IDNs. I am, for example, was chairman of Cyrillic Generation Panel, and I am using Cyrillic in my country, and I have, let's say, one email address, which is dusan@pochta.rus, which is all on Cyrillic. So whatever is below in the standard, you will see this, and you can send me email on this. I will respond to you, and it works. Patrick is right on one thing. Mostly adoption of these standards are problematic. So we have, for now, I was testing these solutions, and I can say that Microsoft is doing fine with IDNs. Secondly, when we consider Apple with default settings, there is no much support in this RFC, which was done by IETF and Patrick also. So there is, when we are talking about IDNs, we need to know those basic things. Second, third, or whatever, next thing, what we need to know about IDNs is how many participants do we have here? It's not that much. Whenever we speak about IDNs, we have a low number of participants. What it means, it's the same in business. In Serbian registry, when where I was participating at the time of establishing .srb Cyrillic domain name in Serbia, being a coordinator or member of various working groups for this TLD, we hoped that the number of the domain names that we would sell would be huge. In fact, when you see around the world, maybe 2 or 3 IDNs are respectful with the figures of domain names. Everything else is a statistical error. To the number of existing, mostly existing ASCII domain name in your country. So the usage of IDNs and all other standards is low because there is no money for us as registrars, for us as registries. There is no money in that. And I'm considering IDN as opera in music. So it's probably younger generation doesn't hear it. It's not popular, but it needs to exist because it's a cultural thing and it's a thing that you need to have in your country. You need to have ability to use your own script. When you see, when you put the thing differently around the world, you can exclude up to 6 countries, USA, Great Britain, Australia, New Zealand, maybe a couple of them more, who are using only Latin script. Everything else, including Sweden, including Europe, France, Italy, etc., we are using IDN script, something which is in Unicode, something which is not ASCII. Latin world is most exciting for me because they are cutting their script to use ASCII script, to use Latin script. So, for example, Italians are cutting, or French are cutting accent grave or accent circumflex or whatever. They are cutting and they are adopting their language to Latin script. Most importantly, by the techniques, let's say mobile phones, if you want to send short a message, SMS, if you want to send SMS, then if you're using your own script, you can use less, and maybe in some countries it will be bigger price for this SMS if you are using. At least you can use half of the characters that you can use in ASCII. So in all countries, they developed, let's say, some variant of Latin version of their language. So Georgia, we are here, they have very nice, very old script, but apparently when they are lazy, when they want to reply fast on Facebook or on any other place, they are using Latin, pure ASCII. So, and this is about the content. This is about the usage. Technology is not giving equal opportunity. For me, for example, I'm asking Georgian guys, do you have keyboard on Georgian script? Let's say, can you go to the shop to buy a laptop with Georgian script? No, you cannot. Probably you can buy Latin or maybe in some places some Cyrillic, and this is a Russian version of Cyrillic. Chinese, they have some keyboards, but the problem starts here, not with the content. The problem starts with my habits to use the script. If you are cutting me the keyboard on the laptop to use my script, or I need to go to shift to my code page and to use this is not fast. So give me keyboard, Cyrillic keyboard, Georgian keyboard, Chinese keyboard. This is, I need to, so this is one of the problem which comes before the content. Then we have the content, and then among the content we have IDN domain names. So I can agree with Patrick in some ways, and I can agree with him that we need to be standard police to make people use the standards. But the problem is much broader than the standard. I will compare IDNs and also all universal acceptance problems like new Gs coming with 4 or more characters. All those problems are same like IPv6 adoption. You need to change software on your email server to get UTF-8 compliance. You need to change the software on your laptop, etc., etc. So this is about adoption. This is not about whether IDNs are good, RFCs or standards are good, or the usage, is there any usage? Right now, as I said, there is no money in IDNs. That's why adoption is slow. That's why we are too few here listening this story.
Thank you very much, Dusan. Questions, please? Please, Robert.
Yeah, thank you, Ramas. While you were talking, there were a couple of things that just came to my mind. Your last consideration that we need money and we don't need to be lazy was letting me think about other problems that we have, that is, for instance, about security, where we should implement the NSSEC, and that has been a slow implementation just because of this. We have several other cases and migration from IPv4 to IPv6 and so on. So there is an overarching question about where to put money on strategic objectives. And so the question is universal acceptance a strategic object that we need to pursue, and so request that we have more investments on this. The second comment was earlier, and I would like to bring this to people's attention because maybe we don't always get the overall complexity of the issue. When you were talking about the email, you said, this on the right side of the email address, we have Unicode. On the left side, we have Unicode. And while you were talking, I was thinking, but if the email is in Arabic, your left side is the right side, and the right side is the left side. So if you have something with a mixed, a page with a mixed script, you have an Arabic page, and then all of a sudden there's your email address, and except that you don't put email addresses generally on web pages, but then all of a sudden the context changes. And I was wondering if either you or Patrick could spend a couple of words to introduce, at least touch on this higher complexity about having different scripts and maybe even going in different directions in the same context.
I will explain this comment like this. I'm not English native speaker, so I can explain to you on Serbian. I cannot explain on English. Joking, of course, but this is about IDN. I was using left and right just to refer that we are here. If I was talking the same thing in Arabic world, let's say in Middle East DNS forum, I would use something differently to explain. Left and right side, but it's not a problem about the standard. The standard is there. Okay, I can complain and I can exchange with Patrick my concerns about using mixing scripts, but standard is there. It's working, tested by me, by a lot of people. It's working. It's there from 2013. It's let's say 5 years. IDNs are there for 10 years or so. Everything is not about, it's not about the standard itself, it's about the adoption of standards. We don't have adoption by Apple, by, let's say, let me give you a good example. I'm booking the hotel in Georgia. So can I use dusan@pochta.rus Cyrillic in the form for booking? No, it says it's not valid email address. Sorry guys, it's valid. It's according to the standards. This is adoption. I need to call this guy to explain, please, validation of emails is not correct. And I need to do that at each hotel, at each form on the internet. This means adoption. And if you don't have in 5 years adoption that I can book a hotel here in Georgia or anywhere in the world with dusan@pochta.rus, then people will say, this standard, sorry, it's something, we will stick to ASCII. So use ASCII, please.
Thank you. More questions?
Hello, my name is David. I work for the Georgian Research and Educational Network Association, GRENA. We are registrars for the IDN, which we have since 2016. And I think the most problem is that IDNs are not very much used by the people. I mean, I don't know the case with Serbia, but in Georgia, I can say that, for example, the registrations of IDNs are, let's say, 2–3% comparing national G domain. It's a very low number. And the reason why people are registering IDN, Georgian IDN, is just like addition of the G domain. It's not translation. They register IDNs to have Georgian domain name, which is similar to which they have in Latin. So, and the question, they have no question in technical aspects, they just want to register similar domain name, not use it. Maybe they're redirecting it when you type in Latin, right? To be shown in the local Georgian language, but it's not common issue. So people are not using it. Despite our big efforts to make it popular, still the registrations are very low. And what's the case, for example, for Serbia? Is it popular in?
As I said previously, this looks like statistical error when you're considering the number of domain names in your second ASCII domain names. Firstly, when did you, from where there is Kokosis Sopo, what is the year that you started .g on ASCII? And 1992, from 1992 till now, you are using .g in ASCII, and you are cutting your script to ASCII, and you are using only ASCII for this. So it becomes like a postal address, like this, some sort of postal address. So right now, how many years? 18 years or something, you are opening, or more, you are opening on your script, and you expect that it's going to be popular. No. It will not be the case. It's not the case everywhere in the world, as I said, except Russian and some Chinese IDNs. It's similar. It's a statistical error because they came late. People already adopted ASCII. Also, the problems that we, Patrick and me, we were mentioning during our speeches, like keyboards, like content, etc., etc. So, same thing in Serbia, if you are asking me, statistical error.
Thank you. Next.
Hi, my name is Alex and I work for Center, country code top level domain name. Thank you so much, Dusan and Patrick, for the great presentation. I just want also to mention that this is a topic very relevant for country code. TLDs, obviously. I have a bit of an information sheet I thought might be interesting with this group as well about which TLD has adopted IDNs at second level and which haven't. And the only thing I would like to highlight about it is the fact that I find it interesting that some TLDs have adopted IDNs as second level, but only for the top level IDN, but not for the ASCII top level. So it's a bit confusing and it's work in progress. So I think that's really something that's interesting to see, that even at the country code level, there's still work on this. So I'll just leave this here.
Thank you. I think Patrick has some comment, right? Can
in a slightly different way. So my point is exactly what you just said, that the main ability for people to actually use their own characters and script and whatever they're using, for example, in messages and in messaging and exchange information in the local script, that is by far the most important thing. For the actual standards, that there I also agree with you, and my point was there that we don't have to work on the standards, we need to make sure that they are adopted and used. And if it is the case that they're not used, then maybe they are not needed. So for EAI, The question there, of course, is if an internationalized email address really is needed, and if it creates, if it really helps, or if it creates more problems. For you, it obviously creates more problems, and for myself, for example, that use Swedish characters which are very, very close to Latin. For me, it's easy to say that, well, my name, I have always had my name as a comment, and then the email address itself is ASCII only. Maybe that is good enough for people in the world. I don't know. Today, the younger people, they don't know what email is anyways. They're using Facebook or Snapchat or whatever. So maybe it's more important for them to be able to use their own names in their own local script as identifiers in those applications. I have no idea, but this is once again why I wanted us to take a step back and not forget the ability to actually exchange information as the content within each one of the various applications that we use, because the standards, which I agree with Dusan, the standards are ready. We just need to make sure they're implemented and adopted. Thank you.
Thank you. Now I would like to ask Martin to your floor, please.
Okay, thank you very much, Maarten Botterman, ICANN board. It has been excellent to hear the introductions of, I think, two people who are deeply involved with two of the most important stream of making this happen. The Universal Access Steering Group, in which Dusan is one of the active members, and the ESSAC, in which Patrick is very important. Because with recognizing the importance of linguistic diversity, recognizing that we need to prepare for that future, the first step have been taken. ICANN has as such a limited role in that. It's really on making the DNS work, accept IDNs, and to do that in a secure and stable way, which is not a sinecure if you realize that some letters in different scripts look very much like letters in another script. And one of the dangers of the internet is that it's been used by malicious actors to confuse people and to lure them into activities they don't want to be part of. So that is a very important aspect to do. So on top level domain, on the ability to reach others in scripts, it's crucial that we also take that aspect into account. In addition, we have there the difficulty that in some scripts there's different expressions of that script, like in Chinese. So again, you see the complexity, which is not a problem locally, if you use it, because then people use the same characters in their mail and whatever, but in their email, it becomes a bigger problem. So from that perspective, I can assure you that also there I can provide support, but is not leading the activities. But they help make the universal acceptance study group possible, and they value very much, well, ESSAC is part of ICANN, but also the board very much appreciates it and listens very careful to the input that is received from that. So the latest state of affairs is that by now 151 IDNs have been delegated. So in principle, they're reachable via the route. As Dusan said, that doesn't mean there's a high usage of them. 95 of them are GTLDs, 56 of them are CCTLDs. And I feel, and we feel, that this is an important first step. I think you mentioned the parallel to IP version 6. In some ways it is, in some ways it isn't, of course. IP version 6 is a necessity because IP version 4 is just too small to cope with future demand. In IDNs it's though that part of the market will never be a market unless we offer IDNs to make it possible. And that relates to facilitating communities. And there a point that was yesterday also coming forward in several sessions. Communities are importantly driving our future, also our future use of the internet. And in that you see that for some people, the IDN would probably be their prime community. That's those that correspond with other people in their region using electronic means with the same script and really are not at home in using any other scripts, but are very happy to use that local script. In India, we see some regions where local trade together provides sometimes products for global trade. But the communication in that region would be very much facilitated by that. Of course, the mobile phone needs to support it too. So that's one thing. The other, but where it does come together with the IPv6 parallel, I think, is I've been involved in the readiness for IPv6 and been able to help the NRO, the RARs, in researching that in the, well, even 10 years ago. We saw that the readiness, the preparedness to be able to deal with IPv6 was beginning to grow from below, well below 50%, well below 20%, up to now most ISPs can deal with it. And it's exceptional for those who can't. At the same time, the use stayed away for a long time, and it's only now beginning to become real. So IPv6 becomes a real factor now. I think we'll see the same in IDNs. We first need to be really ready before the uptake will grow, because unlike the early adapters, the techies, like, I think again, I'm looking at Dusan, but him and some others who are fanatic about trying and doing everything they can to make it work, most of us won't. Most of us will just say, oh, it doesn't work, I'll don't use it, or I'll use the English. So the other thing we saw in IPv6 there is that those who were the early users, unless again there were people like Patrick or others, they stopped using it in some cases. They were using it and they stopped using it because nobody else did. And so I think we'll see those disappointments as well in here. But I do believe strongly, and that's my personal opinion, but it also has the ICANN board support, that investing in making this possible is something we need to continue to do on a long stretch. And we need to be aware that it may take more time than we think. But the only way to make it happen, and the only way to make the internet truly universally usable, is by continuing to support this and continue activities like the ESSEC and like the work your steering group is doing.
Thank you very much. Questions, please.
My name is Nenad Marinkovic. I'm coming from Serbia, and I'm, let's say, a civil society member and PC users a long time ago. I just think that we consider this issue in very short period of time. When I was student, it was 1987. I used PC XT machine for typing my graduate exam, and because I could use Writer, I don't know if somebody remember, I could use our Latin script in Serbian, with Serbian letters, and doing some graphic squares and roots and indexes and everything to use PC. In that time, I would use electronic type machine. So if we could use Latin script in 30 years ago in MS-DOS time, I think that it is only a question of time when we can use all script in the internet world nowadays. So we must be patient and we must continue to work very hard on that. Second thing, I can say example for Serbian territory. We have a Cyrillic and Latin national domain name, but we don't have, for example, a Latin IDN in our domain name. So I register Swedish domain name with that have IDN with our letters. So I have a domain name umreži.se in that. So registries and ICANN are responsible to enable us to use all letters in, and what is important, PCs, when we use all software with English menus, it was a problem for many accounting people to use applications. And they were against that. They preferred to use a notebook and pencils and everything. And then when we changed the menus in local language with local letters, they accepted, and now every company uses PC like standard tool. So definitely we want to reach 1 billion more internet users. We must adapt everything to do anything that we need to enable to use their own language, their own letters, their own tools, and they will use PCs, tablets, everything, and modernize and their lives and help them to use mobile technology and everything. That's my...
Thank you.
Can I just jump in?
Sure.
To Icon, one anecdote. After one IDN session somewhere in eastern part of Europe, one, I will not say the name, but one guy approached me and asked me, I can solve IDN problem very easy. All the money that ICANN is putting in USG, whatever, let's say, group that are dealing with IDNs, switch those money to Russia and Chinese to learn English, and we will solve the IDN. So this is a joke, of course. Yes. I disagree with that, but when he said about ICANN putting a lot of money in USG and other groups, I suddenly remembered that there is a very simple solution for IDNs, to erase IDNs. Of course, wrong one.
One thing more, I'm sorry, Jan Marinković again. I think that people doesn't know that even all Latin letters used in the world are not available in the internet. So there is another working group that work on Latin IDN to be enabled to be used in internet domain names. So obviously it is a lot of work to do and a lot of effort to enable last person to use internet in the world, and it is a question only on time.
Thank you. Please.
Hi, Adam Peake. I was in Dusan, you mentioned keyboards and the unavailability of them, and because that really goes to Patrick's point about the ability to create. And it's sort of strange because I lived in Japan some time ago, and in the early 1990s, one of the things that my colleagues did, they all had their own favorite Japanese keyboard. In fact, many of them would develop keyboards. It was something that people did as getting online in the early 90s, late 80s. And there were already forkings or reversioned versions of MS-DOS that allowed, NEC in particular branded their own particular version of MS-DOS that allowed Japanese characters to be displayed and written, and printers had drivers written and so on. So it's not really a new issue, but I'm very surprised that keyboards are not as widely available as they used to be. I mean, if you go around any Japanese electronics store, you'll see hundreds of different types of keyboards, and people really do have their own favorite. And entering the text isn't hard. It's not hard on an Apple today. It's a phonetic language. So if I want to write kirei now, which is a word for beautiful, I just type K-I on my laptop, and then R-E, and then up comes the kanji, and I choose the kanji. So they actually type as quickly as any Western typist. The typing speed's the same. But the keyboard issue is an interesting one. So keyboards are not... But no, those have got Cyrillic on them. So,
Admit you didn't pay attention.
The other thing is that emoticons have their origin in, I suppose, they are the original IDN. People used to develop characters on radio pages, because it was very difficult to type Japanese characters into a radio pager, so you'd develop these weird-looking things that are now developed into emoticons, because that was an easy way to communicate different types of smile, and you know, you'd have 100 different types of smile that you could represent and send around your radio pager. So late 1980s, early 90s, people were using radio pagers and early versions of emoticons, which were, I think now we have emoticons, and it's an early IDN, I suppose.
Just to highlight, we have here, for example, Armenians. They're using also a very old and beautiful script. Do you have, can I ask, do you have to buy in shops laptop with Armenian script on the keyboard? Same thing. Hmm?
Stickers.
Yes. Even these stickers that is shown, it's putting a lot of effort to change for ordinary people. I don't mean me or anybody in the room. I mean for some people who are not speaking English or didn't use Latin in their lives, it's hard to buy a laptop on Latin script and to learn how to type on domestic script. This is...
Hi, my name is João Pedro. I'll try to put a young perspective on the table because I heard some type machines and things like that. But limiting the conversation to laptops, where in the internet nowadays we're using our mobile devices, especially with digital touchscreens. I think there's an opportunity here to change this discussion from the hardware itself to the software, because if we can find a way of including digital keyboards that you can actually touch, there would be such a discussion right now, because it's up to the programmers and to the demand to provide with the solutions necessary to convey those idioms. Another thing about a comment from the remote participant about the young usage and the behavior itself. I mean, nowadays the world is, the communication is worldwide. We have friendships around countries, so we try as much to keep the communication as simple. So, I mean, it's relatively simple to understand why you were approached with such a solution to everybody learn English. I'm not saying it's right or wrong, because it's like you said, there should be an alternative way of doing it. My opinion, and picking up on your parallel between IPv4 and IPv6, again, both protocols are working right now. So I would propose that as those protocols, they should work in parallel as well. It's not as if the transition should be from one day to another. It should be as integrative as the protocol as IPv4 and IPv6 were. Thank you.
Thank you. Yeah, please.
Just realizing we're approaching the end of the session, and I would love to very much recognize the excellent presentations given so far, and thank you for your leadership. But I also wouldn't want to leave this session without recognizing Roberto Gaetano for organizing this and bringing us together, for being open towards a different stream of thoughts than originally was foreseen, and allowing this to happen, to make this happen, and also for celebrating his birthday today. So, happy birthday, Roberto.
Yeah, just yeah, it's a wonderful way to celebrate my birthday, actually. About changing, I would like to respond to this, because I think that we have a sort of a cultural issue. I think that IDNs, the reason why I have been always open to IDNs. When I was on the ICANN board, I was pushing for the fast track for the ECC-TLD IDN and so on, is because we need to be open. We need to be open to new things coming and to enlarging the offer of the things that we provide in order to reach more people. So if there is a sort of dissenting view that comes, I think it's absolutely important, and it's a duty for whoever coordinates these sessions to be open and to give space to the dissenting view, because otherwise those meetings will be completely useless, because it will be the same old people who are talking about themselves. But there was one thing one comment that was prompted to me by hearing the different comments. I'm sort of wondering whether we are facing a chicken and egg kind of issue. So there is not enough that is done in order to develop new things, new keyboards and so on. On the other hand, there's not enough adoption of alternative ways like the local scripts, because maybe because we don't have a full deployment of the tools. So this is what I yeah, I'm an old timer, so I will use old paradigms. One that I was using 30 years ago when I was in the telco business was the fax problem. The fax is useful only if you have enough people that have faxes, because otherwise you have this nice thing that serves no practical purpose. So again, we need to do something in order to incentivate the market to use these tools, and the producers, the manufacturers, to produce these tools. So there is an effort that we have to have. The answer that I have for the comment that you had is simple solutions are not always the best. It might have been simpler, but then the next step is why don't all the people in the world speak one language? We have seen the Esperanto experiment, still something that comes from way back in the past. It didn't work out. We have wonderful diversity in this world, and we need to go against the push that we have in this globalized society that pushes towards uniformity and the reduction of the communication richness. And we have to invert this tendency, and the internet is giving us those tools and this possibility. So the internet, if we are really serious about the internet is for everyone, then we need to endorse and push the diversity that will come with universal acceptance, with IDNs, with different languages, different scripts, and so on, including accepting dissenting opinions in a workshop. So thank you. Sorry for this long speech, non-intended, but since I'm now having my birthday, I felt that I could have this extra minute. Thank you.
Go through some main points that were raised, and of course, at the end, you can add, agree, disagree, express your opinion. As the main topic is introduced by the fact that a significantly large number of people cannot use the internet conveniently and effectively because of the barriers associated with characters, writing system, language. These barriers go beyond the domain name systems and among others include TDLs, IDN, UI issues with ASCII, search engines, email address, internationalization, etc. Hence, universal acceptance is not only the question of IDNs. These barriers are affecting people's ability to send and receive information or to create audio, text, and video. Therefore, the ultimate goal should be ability for people to create content and change the content in their local languages and scripts, regardless of whether it is text or audio. Usage of IDNs and all other standards is low because there is no money for registers or registries. Hence, IDN is something that needs to exist because it is a cultural thing and it is the thing that you need to have in your country, but it is not popular. This is supported by the fact that their usage is very low still in many countries. The problem main is in our habits, and that's visible in the very example of using keyboard on our local alphabet, which is quite rare to find nowadays. So here is the first problem to start with, and then followed by the problems about the content, and finally about the IDNs. Standards are not the main issue, but rather the implementation of standards. So we need to make sure that the standards are implemented really in practice. Also, are we going around with this topic because there is not that much deployment in the practice? If people are using these tools, then they would maybe become more common among manufacturers and others. If we want to keep the internet open to everyone, we need to preserve the diversity on it, especially through the mechanisms such as IDNs. That would be pretty much. Yeah.
Thank you. Finally, I would like to thank, first of all the speakers for interesting view, and for all participants for active participation. I think this was rather interesting and useful. Sorry? And the technical staff. Yeah. And finally, I would like to thank technical staff who organized this meeting for us. Thank you very much. Thank you.